We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph and Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 77a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara quoted the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that if you have a situation where it was a mum that was hidden, so then the husband can have a claim. However, if it's a situation where it was a mum shebegoloi, where it was out in the open, so then the husband should have known about it, he can't have a claim later on. And so the Gemara now says, V'nichba, let's say you have somebody who has epilepsy, kimumin shebeseser dami. That is the same status as a blemish that is hidden. That is something that the husband would not necessarily have known about. Rashi over here says, Nichba choli shemimenu nofel la'oretz v'yesh lo zman lavo. You're talking about a sickness here where it causes the person to faint. Kimumin shebeseser dami lefishin is heres biyom zmana milazes ben abrios. She's very careful on the day that she's expecting that this is going to happen to her. There's a set time where this usually would happen to her, so she would make sure not to go out in public. It's something she can hide, and therefore this is considered like a mum shebeseser. And the Gemara says, "V'hani mili dekviya leizman." That's only true if you're talking about an epileptic where there's a set time where it's going to happen, so we can assume that's beseser that was hidden away. Avalo kviya le kemumin shebegoli dami. But if let's say it was something where there wasn't a set time, it could happen at any time, so then that's already like a mum shebegoli. That's something that everybody knew about, and therefore in that situation the husband would not have a claim, and he would have to pay the ksuba to the wife. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ha'ish shenoldu bo mumin. Let's say you have a situation of the man, the husband, and he develops blemishes. Ein kofen oso lahotzi. We do not force him to divorce the wife. Amar Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, B'med devar mamurim. When is this true? B'mumin hakatanim. That's talking about small blemishes. Avol b'mumin hagadolim. But if it is larger blemishes, kofen oso lahotzi, then we in fact do force him to divorce the wife. And the Gemara says, Rav Yehuda tani noldu chia barav tani hayu. Rav Yehuda says that the Mishnah is talking about where these developed, meaning the blemishes developed on the husband after the marriage already began. And Chia Barav says, no, we're talking about if he had the blemishes. The Mishnah means if he had the blemishes before the marriage, that's what we're talking about over here. That's where the Tana Kama says we do not force him to divorce. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel makes a distinction between small blemishes and larger blemishes. And the Gemara explains, Man Damar Noldu, the one who says that the Mishnah is talking about a situation where the blemish is developed, Kol Shekein Hayu, so certainly in a situation where he already had the blemishes, certainly in that case, according to the Tana Kama, we will not force him to divorce, the Kasavra V'Kibel, because she knew about them and she accepted it, so therefore he doesn't have to divorce his wife in such a case. Man Damar Hayu, the one who said that if he had the blemishes previously, he doesn't have to divorce his wife, Avol Noldu Lo, but let's say they developed, then we wouldn't say that, because if they developed, he would have to divorce his wife, because she never accepted such a situation. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, we'll bring a proof now from Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, B'amed devar ma'amurim, when is this true that we don't force him to divorce her? B'mumin ketanim, that's talking about if it's a small blemishes, aval b'mumin gedolim, but if it is larger blemishes, kofen oso lahotzi, so then we do in fact force him to divorce the wife. And so the Gemara now says, B'shlama l'man damar noldu. I understand if you're going to say, according to the one who says that the Mishnah is talking about where they developed after they had already been married, Hainu deshani ben gedolim lekatanim. It would make sense then to make a distinction between a big blemish and a small blemish. They developed afterwards. It was something that came unexpectedly. If it's small, it's not a reason to force a divorce. If it's large, then we can understand why it would be a reason, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, to force the divorce. But according to the one who says that these blemishes were there before the marriage, and the Tana Kama says we do not force the divorce, and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel makes a distinction, but Mali Gedola, Mali Katanim, what's the difference if it's large or small in a situation where it was already there? Hasavra V'Kibla, she already knew about it, she accepted it, who cares? If it's a large one also, she accepted it. And to that the Gemara says, no, we could answer, Kesuvura hi sheyachol lekabel. It could be that she thought she'd be able to accept this large blemish. V'achshav ein yachol lekabel, but now she sees she's not able to accept it. And the Gemara says, V'elohein mumin gedolim, the following are considered to be large blemishes. Pirush Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel explains, could go nismeseno. For example, let's say he becomes blind in his eye. Nikta yado, let's say his hand gets cut off. V'nishbura raglo, his foot breaks. Those would be considered larger blemishes. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was learned, Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah. We make a distinction between small and large blemishes. Rava Amar, Rav Nachman, Rava says that Rav Nachman says, Halacha kedivrei Chachamim, that the halacha is like the Chachamim. Again, the Chachamim, Tana Kama said, we never force a divorce in this situation. And the Gemara continues, Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, does Rabbi Yochanan really say the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, as we just quoted from Rabbi Yochanan? Ve'amar Rabba bar bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabba bar bar Chana say that Rabbi Yochanan said, B'chol makom sheshana Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel b'mishnaseinu, halacha kamoso, that in all areas where Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is mentioned in our Mishnah, the halacha is like him, chutz me'arev v'tzidon v'raya achrona, except for these three cases over here, arev, tzidon, and raya achrona. And what the Gemara means when asking this question is that Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, so he would not have made a statement that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah, because that would imply in our Mishnah, and only in our Mishnah, and only in cases where he specifies. But on the contrary, Rabbi Yochanan said, according to Rabbi bar bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan said that the halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, so that would contradict the version of Rabbi Yochanan that he said the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel only in our Mishnah. And to that the Gemara answers, Amoroi ninu v'aliva de Rabbi Yochanan. It's machlokas Amoroim, exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, V'elu shekofin oso lahotzi, the following husbands, the Bezin forces them to divorce their wife. Muka shchin, let's say he's afflicted with boils, meaning the husband has boils. Uval polipos, or he has polyps, the Gemara will explain that. V'hamekamitz, or he is a gatherer, that is his profession. V'hamitzaref nechosha, somebody who's a melder of copper. V'habursi, and somebody who's a tanner. Those last ones are ones that are involved in a profession which has a very bad odor, and that's why the Bezin forces them to divorce their wives. Bein shahayu ad shelo nisu, and the Mishnah says this is true whether they had that before, whether this condition applied to them before they were married, uvein mishanisu, or whether it developed after the marriage began, uvein mishanisu nolder, whether it developed again after the marriage began. In all of those cases, the Bezin forces him to divorce his wife. V'al kulan amar Rabbi Meir, and on all of these cases, Rabbi Meir says, Avapi shehisna imo, even though he stipulated this with her beforehand, he told her this was the situation. Yechol hishatomar, she can say, Svura yisi shani yechol lekabel, I thought I'd be able to accept this. V'achshav eini yechol lekabel, now I see that I'm not able to accept it. The Chachamim omrim, but the Chachamim say mekabelas hi al karcha. No, if there was a stipulation, then she is forced to accept it. Chutz mi muka shchin. The only exception is the case of the muka shchin, where he has these boils. Mipnei shemim yikaso, because this is a condition that consumes his flesh. And the Mishnah continues, Maisa b'Tzidon, there was an incident in Sidon, but Borsi echad shemeis, there was a particular tanner and he died. V'hayalo ach Borsi, and he had a brother who was also a tanner, and now she was falling to Yibam, to this brother. Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim said, Yechol Hishatomer, that she is able to say, she can claim, Liachicha hayisi Yechol lekabel, to your brother, so I was willing to accept the condition. Ulecha eini Yechol lekabel, but for you I'm not willing to accept this condition. And the Gemara continues, My Bal Polipos, what does it mean he has polyps? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Reach achotem, we're talking about a bad odor that comes from his nose. But Masnisaton, in the Brisa was taught Reach hapeh, we're talking about a bad odor that comes from his mouth. Ravasi Masni Ipcha, Ravasi had it in reverse. He had it that Shmuel was the one that said that the odor comes from the mouth. Umanach Basimani, he had a mnemonic to remember this, and the mnemonic was Shmuel lo pasuk pume mikule pirkin, that Shmuel, his mouth didn't stop from discussing the parak, so it's a reference to Shmuel and the mouth, and so that shows that Shmuel was the one that talked about the Reach hapeh. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'mekamitz, one who is a gatherer." My mekamitz. What does it mean that the person is a gatherer? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, "Zeha mekabitz tzoas klavim." We're talking about somebody who gathers the dung of dogs. Meisvei. They ask the following question: Mekamitz is a borsi. It says in the Brisa that mekamitz is the same thing as a tanner. Now the mekabitz tzoas klavim. The reason why he's gathering the tzoas klavim is for tanning purposes, but it doesn't mean he's a tanner. So it seems to be a contradiction. And the Gemara says, "V'lataymech." But 1 second, according to your reasoning, why are you asking this question only on Rav Yehuda? Tikshei lach masnisin, you can ask from this brisa on our Mishnah. Ha-mekamitz va-mitzaref nechoshes va-borsi. It has two separate things. Mekamitz and borsi are two separate things. And here the brisa says mekamitz and borsi are identical. And so the Gemara says, Bishlama masnisin lo kasha. I understand how we can answer the Mishnah, why the Mishnah is not a contradiction to the Brisa. Kan beborsi gadol, kan beborsi katan. In one case, we're talking about someone who's a tanner on a large scale. In the other case, we're talking about someone who does it on a smaller scale. There are different kinds of tanners, so it's possible to say they are distinct, and it's possible to say they are identical. Elo Rav Yehuda kasha, but according to Rav Yehuda, who says that what does it mean mekamitz? It means mekabetz tzoas klavim. So that actually is going to be a contradiction to the Brisa, which says mekamitz is a kind of a borsi. And so to that the Gemara answers, Tanoi, no, it's a machlokas tanoim, what exactly mekamitz is. The Tanyas will end in a Brisa. Mekamitz is a borsi. One opinion is that mekamitz is a borsi, is a tanner. V'yesh omer, but others say that It's referring to somebody who gathers the tzoa from the dogs. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, so it said also in the Mishnah, again, somebody who melds this copper and the tanner. And the Gemara says, "My mitzaref nechoshes." What does it mean? He melds the copper. Rav Ashi Amar Choshli Dude. Rav Ashi says it means that he used to fashion from the copper. He used to fashion these kettles. Rava Bar Bar Chana Amar Rava Bar Bar Chana says, "Zahamechatech nechoshes meikaro." It's actually somebody who takes the copper out from its source, from the ground. He develops the copper. And the Gemara says, Tanya Kavase de Rava Bar Bar Chana. We have a brisa that supports Rava Bar Bar Chana. Ezo mitzaref. What is a mitzaref? Zamachatech nechoshes meikaru. Exactly that. Somebody who cuts the copper from its source. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rav says, Omer eini zon ve'eini mefarnes. Let's say a person says that I'm not going to sustain my wife. I'm not going to support my wife. Yotzi v'yiten ksuba. So he has to divorce her and he has to pay her the ksuba. Azal Rebbe Lazar Amar l'shmaita kami de Shmuel. Rebbe Lazar went and he said over this teaching in front of Shmuel. Amar, and Shmuel said, Achsua sa'are le'Lazar. You should feed barley to a Lazar. Achakofen also lahotzi yichfu Lazar. This doesn't make sense as halacha. Instead of forcing him to divorce his wife, instead you should force him to support his wife. And the Gemara continues with Rav. So how does Rav respond to this argument? Ein adam darim nachash bechvifa. A person is not able to live together with a snake in a basket, meaning to say a woman cannot live with a husband who the court has to force the husband to support her. That is not a tenable situation, and therefore instead we force him to divorce her, and we force him to pay the ksuba. Kisalag Rabbi Zera, when Rabbi Zera went up to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechel Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes, he found that Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes, the Yosef V'Kamar Law, Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan, that he was sitting and saying over this same halacha that we force him to divorce in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Le, so he said to him, Maldo Achsua Sa'arin LaLazar B'Bavel. It was because of this halacha that they fed barley to Elazar in Bavel, meaning they said that this halacha is not accurate. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi. Rav Yehuda says, the Rav Asi says, Ein ma'asin el l'psulos. We only force divorces in situations where the marriage is a disqualified marriage. Ke'amrisa kamei de Shmuel, when this was said in front of Shmuel, Amar, he said, Kegon, for example, what we mean is, Almona l'kohen gadol, for example, an Almona marries a kohen gadol, that's a prohibited marriage on a doraisa level, and similarly, ugrusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyot, let's say a grusha chalutza, a divorce, you're a chalutza, marry a kohen hedyot, or mamzeres u'nesina l'Yisrael, a mamzeres or nesina marry Yisrael, or bas Yisrael, a sinner, a mamzer, or a Jewish girl marries a sin or a mamzer. All of these are prohibited marriages on a doraisa level. Avol nasa isha v'sha imo eser shanim. But let's say you have a situation where he marries a woman and he stays with her for 10 years. V'lo yolden, she doesn't give birth. So ein kofen oso. In such a situation, we do not force a divorce, even though he has not performed the mitzvah of pru revu. We don't force a divorce in such a situation. Rav Tachlifa bar Avime Amar Shmuel, and Rav Tachlifa bar Avime says that Shmuel says, Afilu nasa isha v'sha imo yod shanim. No, even if a person married a woman and stayed with her for 10 years, v'lo yolden, she didn't give birth, kofen so, even in that situation, we would force a divorce. And the Gemara now tries to bring a proof from our Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Elu shekofen oso lahotzi, mukashchin, uval polipos, gives various cases where we force a divorce with these blemishes in the Mishnah. And so the Gemara says, B'shalom Ravasi, I understand according to Ravasi. So the Rabbanon Katani, Doraisa lo Katani. So Ravasi had all of these Doraisa situations, like Almona l'kohen gadol, Grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyot. So the Doraisa cases aren't listed in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah deals with the Rabbanon cases, doesn't deal with cases that are marriages that are prohibited on a Doraisa level. Elul Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi, but according to Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi, there's an additional case that should have been in our Mishnah. Listening Nasa Isha v'sha imo eser shanim v'lo yalda kofen oso. It should say in our Mishnah, if he marries a woman and he's with her for 10 years and they don't have children, we force him to divorce. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Lo kash, it's not difficult. Ha b'milei ha b'shute. When it comes to a situation where they haven't had children, so there we only tell him to divorce, but we don't force him to divorce physically with sticks. We don't use violence to force the divorce. All the cases in our Mishnah, we even use sticks. Rashi over here says, Ha b'milei apirya v'ribya b'milei miyasrin. When it comes to being fruitful and multiplying, that issue, so there we have words, we tell him that he should divorce. B'shute lo radinale, but we don't hit him with sticks. But the cases in our Mishnah, we hit him with sticks even. It's impossible for her to accept such a situation. But the Gemara continues, Maskifla Rabbi Abba asks, B'dvarm le'vasar avid, it talks about the fact that words alone, that's not a way to give a proper musr. So apparently words alone would not be sufficient. Elama Rabbi Abba, rather Rabbi Abba says, Hava ha b'shutei, rather no, both cases, in all cases, we're going to use the sticks, we're going to use physical violence, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis.